unstable. I feel able to turn the tables. I could do this. Just keep moving, keep your hands up, stupid. I feel lucid, a new viewing. I can see the end, I can see my future, I can view it. It's right there for the taking. Everything I've ever wanted, dreams are just waiting. I just gotta fight for it, willing to die for it, willing to like sort of.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Price, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Big Blue and Hyman will be on their way shortly. We're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the topic of today, and then once we put out all the information, then Hyman and Blue will join, and we'll discuss the information. I want to say thank you to all the early ongoers and folks in the live chat, subscribers, mods, the whole nine yards. We appreciate you guys. So, we had a bit of a document dump happen not too long ago, and I've been getting a lot of emails, or Facebook messages, emails, the whole nine yards referencing this order addressing the IGG DNA and the order for in-camera review. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say that this is a win for the defense. They're going to finally be able to see, or somebody's going to finally be able to see the IGG information. Well, let's break it down. Let's read what it really says and what's going on. So I highlighted the important parts of the discussion today so we can kind of speed through it. As part of law enforcement investigation into the homicides, the FBI employed the use of investigative genetic genealogy, IGG, using DNA located on a K-bar knife sheath found at the scene. All right, so we already knew that. They found a K-bar knife, and they found the DNA on that K-bar knife. Nothing about law enforcement's use of the IGG was used to obtain the arrest warrant for Kohberger or to obtain the search warrant for his DNA. Now, I know a lot of folks are saying like, hey, there's DNA, information that is brought up in the probable cause affidavit. There was a 166-page drop, and it references the DNA as well. Well, first, I think where the confusion might be is the different types of DNA that there are. First and foremost, they found touch DNA on the knife sheath. They created an STR profile at the Idaho State Lab. That profile, or that DNA, was sent to a third-party genetic lab where they developed the S&P profile. Now, the other DNA sample that was also there is a familial DNA. That was basically what that was when they pulled the DNA out of Kohberger's parents' trash on December 27th. And they, in my opinion, weren't trying to find trash or DNA from Bryan Kohberger's father. They knew Bryan Kohberger was staying with his parents. I think they were trying to find his DNA amongst the trash, however, they didn't find any, but they got some for his dad. So those are the different types. You have the IGG, the STR, and SNP, and then you have dad's DNA. Those are three different types of DNA used very differently. And I think some folks are getting confused with the familial DNA from the father and the IGG of the genetic tree that's being built. And I'll explain why here in a sec. Let's go through this. So this goes on to say the court finds that the defense is likely entitled to see at least some of the information from the IGG investigation, even if it may ultimately be found to have no relevance in Kohberger's defense. However, because the court has not seen exactly what information pertaining to the use of the IGG is available, the court cannot say precisely what should and what should not be disclosed at this time. Because of this uncertainty, the court grants the state's request for an in-camera review of the IGG information. After such review, the court will enter an appropriate discovery and protective orders. Basically, what that means is that they feel that there's probably nothing there, but they can't say with certainty, so they have to look at it. And once they look at it, then they'll give that determination. So let's continue. It says, this is the background. It says, while investigating the murders, law enforcement discovered a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogen. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath. Once law enforcement had a single source of DNA from the K-bar knife sheath, they conducted what is called a short tandem repeat STR analysis. law enforcement submitted the STR DNA profile obtained from the K-bar knife sheath to the Combined DNA Index System, or Codex, a database of STR DNA profiles from convicted offenders, arrestees, and crime scene evidence to identify the source of the DNA. No match was found, right? Meanwhile, law enforcement continued to investigate the homicides. They conducted a video canvass in the area of the King Road residence. So this was happening. This profile was found very early because this was happening while they were conducting the video canvasses. The video canvasses started the next day. It says that in the probable cause affidavit, states that the first thing that they did were the video canvases and that they found the white Elantra and the whole 9 yards, right? So on November 29, 2022, after reviewing the video footage and asking law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra in the area, a 2015 white Elantra registered to defendant Bryan Kohberger was located in Pullman, Washington. The state case alleges that with this information, law enforcement determined Kohberger's physical description match that was given to investigators by the surviving roommate to the victims and Kohberger's cell phone travel was consistent with that of the white Elantra in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022. Based on this information, law enforcement believed Kohberger to be the driver of the white Elantra that was seen on video surveillance around the King Road residence at the time of the homicide. All right, so this is pretty important, right? Because this says here that they believe that Kohberger was the person that was traveling on the surveillance footage. Well, when do you think that they believed that? Was that before they got his name? Or was that early on in the investigation by some secret witness that we don't know anything about? I think it's when the DNA came back from the genetic tree saying, hey, this is Bryan Kohberger. Look at him. Now we know that he drives an Elantra. Now we know these things. And now I'll explain why it's important here in a bit. On December 27th, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash of Kohberger's family residence located in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. The evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. On 28th of December, Idaho State Lab reported the DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological suspect's father. Right. On December 30th, that's when Kohberger was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder of the first degree and a count of burglary. A search warrant for Kohberger's DNA was issued on January 5th. That's an important date to remember. January 5th, 2023. A traditional STR DNA comparison was done between the STR profile found on the K-bar knife sheath and the defendant's DNA, and that it was a statistical match. Investigating the genealogy, it says it is unknown to this court when exactly law enforcement employed the use of the IGG. We know when they got the result, though. This is from the New York Times. This is Inside the Hunt for the Idaho Killer. This document states here, FBI personnel worked with the profile that Othram had produced, according to the 2 people familiar with the investigation, spending days building out a family tree that began with a distant relative. By the morning of December 19th, records show that investigators had a name, Bryan Kohberger. He had a white Elantra. He was a student at the university 8 miles away from the murder scene. Now, that's when they got his name. Now, they utilized the IGG. They got his name on December 19th. Is it possible that they knew his name before then? Unlikely. Reason being, and this is from the state's response on July 14th, it says the IGG process could have no effect whatsoever on the STR analysis. Moreover, the DOJ policy on the IGG explains the FBI can only use the IGG after the investigating officer or investigating agency has pursued reasonable investigative leads to solve the case, and the perpetrator's identity remains unknown. So once they have exhausted all methods of trying to locate a suspect and they have no more suspects anymore, is when they can utilize this IGG, which means that they had no idea who this guy was until December 19th, which makes sense as to why everything was done after that date. The warrant for his phone pings or his locations come out on December 23rd. They pull the trash at his parents' house December 27th. They arrest him December 29th or 28th, 30th, somewhere around there. All right, let's continue this. Go back. Now, the defense is claiming that, they want the information from the IGG and that this can somehow help their client. So, and that this is somehow connected, or it can't be used as a tip. Why is it being used as a tip? And it's, they don't have to deploy the information. Well, it's kind of like a lie detector test, right? Where the lie detector test doesn't, it's not a certainty. It's just a tool that the police and prosecution use to help them point in the direction of where they should look. Basically the same thing. So it says here, because the identity of the person from whom the crime scene sample came from is often unknown, law enforcement used a false name, John Doe, for example, to submit to GED match. Then with their John Doe matches someone in the database, they use genealogical data to determine a common ancestor who might be a great-great-grandfather or great-great-grandmother, then triangulate other data, birth records, and stuff like that. So basically what they end up doing is they get a piece of DNA and they enter it into the 23andMe Ancestry or whoever, and then they're going to get some matches back. The closely related relative is who they're going to look at. Now, if you have, for instance, first cousins, what does that mean? That means that those two folks share the same grandparent, right? If you have second cousins, they share the same great-great-grandparent. Third cousins, you get the drift, right? So what they do is they say, all right, we got this one person. This is a fifth cousin. So they look up the great-great-great-great-grandparent, and that is also the great-great-great-great-grandparent of the suspect. And then from there, they basically try to find out or figure out all of the offspring of that person and those individuals, and so on until they can kind of get an idea of who this person is based on area and things of that nature. So this continues. Bicka Barlow, one of the witnesses who testified on the behalf of Kohberger, explained the process of the IGG. The use of databases like GED match does not necessarily lead to a single individual as a potential suspect. Now, this is from the defense's witness. It says that the database and the GED match does not necessarily lead to a single individual as a potential suspect. Because it doesn't point directly at Kohberger, it cannot be used in court against him, which is why they're not using it in court against him. The state describes the law enforcement use of the IGG in this case as follows. Investigators used IGG to begin the process of developing a lead to the individual who left the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The Idaho State Police utilized a private laboratory to develop an SNP profile from the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The private laboratory stated using genetic genealogy to develop a family tree that after law enforcement decided the FBI would take over, the private laboratory ceased its efforts and sent the SNP profile to the FBI. The FBI uploaded the SNP profile to one or more publicly available genetic genealogy services to identify the possible family members of the suspect based on shared genetic data. The FBI could then view through a genetic genealogy service portal information regarding the potential relatives of the suspect who left the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. Based on information the FBI could see on the genetic genealogy service portal, the FBI went to work building family trees of the genetic relatives of the suspect DNA left in the crime scene in an attempt to identify the contributor of the unknown DNA. So basically everything what I told you guys as far as going back to the great-great-grandparents and following that tree down. The product of genealogy conducted by the FBI was a family tree that contained name, birth date, and death date, if applicable, of hundreds of relatives, as well as their familial connections between each other and the suspect, Bryan C. Kohberger. The FBI then sent the local enforcement a tip to investigate that defendant. The IGG process pointed law enforcement towards a defendant, but it did not provide law enforcement with substantive evidence of guilt. The FBI did not conduct a direct comparison between the SNP profile from the K-bar knife sheath to the defendant's SNP profile. That type of direct comparison required the more traditional STR DNA analysis, which was conducted by the Idaho State Police, not the FBI. Nothing about the SNP profile, the use of the IGG, or the family tree was used by law enforcement to obtain the arrest warrant for Kohberger the January 5th, 2023 search warrant for Kohberger's DNA, or other search warrants in this case. So remember when I said January 5th was an important date? Let's go back and look at at the search warrants here. So this is the search warrant and that 166 page drop, right? It states here on 12/30/22 servicing search warrants at the step 2 apartment. So remember that date, 12/30. What was the date I told you guys? January 5th. So this is before they had the warrant for Bryan Kohberger to test his DNA. Now what they do is they utilize in here, and we'll go down to page 44. What it says here is, and I'll go back up, it says, supplemental disclosure DNA test. I have been informed by Detective J.R. Talbot of the Idaho State Police that on November 13th, a sheath was discovered or recovered at the King Road residence under or next to the body of Madison Mogen. The Idaho State Lab obtained a male DNA profile from the sheath. On December 27th, law enforcement officers in Pennsylvania recovered the trash originated from the Kohberger family. The trash was sent to the Idaho State Crime Lab for testing. On the 28th of December, the state lab reported the DNA profile obtained by the trash was compared to the suspect's DNA profile, and it came back to being that profile being the father of the suspect, right? The information is being provided by the court pursuant to my duty of obligation and fully candid to the court. I do not believe this information is exculpatory for the suspect. However, if the court believes it is exculpatory, then the court should consider the supplemental disclosure in its evaluation of existence for probable cause lack thereof. But I am specifically asking the court not to consider the supplemental disclosure as evidence supporting the existence of probable cause. The reason for this is request that if the DNA results are held inadmissible at some point, such a ruling would not impact the finding of probable cause for this warrant, so long as the court is satisfied with the probable cause, regardless of the DNA test result. So all that is saying, and basically what that means is, whose DNA did they test towards the knife sheath at that point? On December 30th, 2022, whose match did they have? No one's. They had the fact that DK's father, his DNA came back as 99.9998% the suspect's father. So they didn't have a direct match. So when they go in there and they get these warrants and they're utilizing this DNA, they're basically what they're saying is it's not going to be utilized in court later because we're going to have the DNA STR profile to match directly to Bryan Kohberger. So it's not as shady as what some folks are saying. It's just the fact is they hadn't had the warrant yet. That came on January 5th. Let's go back to this. While the FBI no longer has access to view much of the information it used to create the family tree, the state acknowledges the FBI does possess the family tree itself. Notes jotted down by FBI agents as they constructed the family tree, and any records created to document the removal of the SNP profile from the genetic genealogy services pursuant to the DOJ policy. For protective order, let me see. Let me go down here. Oh, yeah. All right. So under the material to preparation of the defense. And what I just kind of skipped through is a bunch of different state cases that where the argument of the IGG was brought up. And in each case, the defendant didn't win. So it's just other cases. Material to the preparation of the defense. In support of the argument that the IGG information is not discoverable, the state argues that the IGG information is not material to the preparation of the defense because the defendant is charged with killing 4 people, not with being related to a particular person. The mere fact that uploading the completed SNP profile into a publicly available genetic genealogy service led law enforcement to relatives of the defendant does not affect the strength of the evidence against him. The family tree built by the FBI merely pointed law enforcement to the defendant, and law enforcement followed that lead to develop the substantive evidence of guilt that was used for his arrest that will be used at trial. The only relevant DNA evidence in this is the DNA found on the knife sheath and the DNA taken directly from Kohberger, because those DNA profiles can be directly compared and according to the state matched. So that's exactly what I've been saying. So you can't compare Bryan Kohberger's dad's DNA that they pulled out of the trash to the sheath and use that against Kohberger at trial. You can use that as evidence to go search his apartment. You can use that as evidence to pull Bryan Kohberger's DNA. And, if it ends up coming back that it didn't match or not a complete match, then at that point, that's when they move forward in a different direction, or and they got the wrong guy if that ends up being the case. But that would mean that Bryan Kohberger has like a long lost brother that nobody knows about. But let's continue this. So how the IGG profile was created and how many other people the FBI chose to ignore during their investigation. So that's what the defense wants to know. And my question is, does it really matter if they ignored other people? Like if they had somebody who said, hey, whatever. But you had this other suspect that had clearly more evidence against them. Law enforcement is going to, they only have so much. What's the word I'm looking for? They have services. They need to limit their stuff because they only have so many services. They only have so much folks that are there that are going to be applying help, right? So many different officers, so many different labs. I think there's one. And also you have to remember the FBI has one lab and they're working on more than just the Idaho case. They're working on multiple cases. So resources, that was the word I'm looking for. They have to focus their resources. All right. Defense team has discussed the use of statistics in this type of case with experts who have informed defense counsel that the manner of identifying Mr. Kohberger via this type of search may have significant impacts on statistical analysis of CODIS profile generated by the Idaho State Lab. Without access of actual genetic genealogy search methods and results, it is impossible for qualified experts to address the issue. So basically what they're saying is that if you go solely based off of the SNP profile, and it comes back to find out that it's not the right person or the STR profile says something differently, then that's going to obscure the facts or the stats. That's just the way you see it. You know what I mean? Let's continue. And this is basically what it boils down to, what the defense's argument. Essentially, the defense would like to know whose DNA matched the suspect SNP DNA profile uploaded to the genetic genealogy services, and who else was identified on the family tree. The defense could then investigate those individuals who share DNA with Kohberger to determine if these individuals were around the King Road residence at the time of the murders, and if law enforcement obtained these individuals' DNA and tested it found on the sheath. The defense seeks this information to determine whether Kohberger was or is the sole suspect. So they're saying that Kohberger has a brother out there that nobody knows about, and that this guy could have been the killer, and we need to find out if he was by the King Road residence. Well, things kind of blacked out there for a second. I hope I'm back. All right. An IGG search can impact a statistical rarity of a profile in a manner similar to a cold hit search, meaning that the statistic that is generated by an analysis of a IGG search could yield a relevant or an admissible statistic. Research in the area of the impact of the IGG search on statistical weight of DNA comparison using standard of STR DNA profiles is ongoing. Additionally, like in Harmon and Bortry, it is plausible that Kohberger may use the IGG information obtained in discovery to challenge the admissibility of other evidence, while such challenge seems futile, since the IGG information was not used to obtain the search warrant for Kohberger's DNA and will not be present at trial by the state. The court cannot say with certainty that the defense team could not make a successful challenge if given the information they seek. Basically, because the court hasn't seen the evidence that the prosecution has from the IGG, they can't say with 100% shadow of a doubt that there isn't anything there. But they also say, and this is from the court, the challenge seems futile. You don't know what that means. That just means that it seems pointless. Yeah, and that's the thing. These are the challenges. This is what Kohberger's challenging. They're not. If you think an innocent man is challenging the fact that they want to see if there's an evil twin brother out there that was switched at birth and, nobody knows about, that's crazy. The FBI was working in conjunction with the Moscow Police Department and Idaho State Lab to investigate, or Idaho State Police to investigate the homicides. From the court's understanding, the FBI set up a public tip line, conducted the IGG analysis, identified the suspect's car as a 2011 and 2016 Hyundai Elantra, and possibly aided in interviewing witnesses outside of Idaho. So when people say that, oh man, Moscow Police Department or Idaho State Police have these crooked cops and they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, this case wasn't solved by them. It appears that it was completely solved by the FBI. So all this theories of frame job, throw that out the window. Informants. The state argues that the Genetic Genealogy Service and the individuals related to Kohberger whose profiles matched the defendant's S&P profile are informants whose identities are protected from disclosure under Idaho Rule 16. Disclosure must not be required of an informant's identity unless the informant is to be produced as a witness at hearing trial subject to any protective order under subsection 1 of this rule disclosure under subsection. So basically what that means is that the defense doesn't have to disclose informants if they don't use them in court. They're not bringing Bryan Kohberger's relatives into court to testify that, they submitted their DNA to, 23andMe and are related to Bryan Kohberger. That's not going to happen. In conclusion, the state's argument that the IGG investigation is wholly irrelevant since it was not used in obtaining any warrants and will not be used in trial is well supported. Nonetheless, Kohberger is entitled to view at least some of the IGG information in preparing his defense, even if it may ultimately be found to be irrelevant. In balancing these interests, the court will conduct an in-camera review of all IGG information in possession, custody, and control of the state, including the FBI, to determine precisely what needs to be disclosed and what does not need to be disclosed, and issue any protective order necessary. Well, I'm going to bring the guys up. How's it going, y'all? Y'all were sitting in the back. Y'all listened to everything that I just said. What are your thoughts on all this? We'll start off with you. Happy belated birthday, my man.
Hey, man, thank you. 59 years old,
A la murder.
I was hearing everything about the documents and whatnot, but I already said one not so fast. Yeah, that was, I think that might have been the record, I believe.
It could have been.
Yeah, man, I could see why, they're not trying to keep that in, because it doesn't pertain exactly to Kohberger itself. It's just the way they got to him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. What they're saying is, and even in this last statement here, it says, the state's argument that the IGG investigation is wholly irrelevant since it was not used in obtaining any warrants and will not be used in trial is well supported. They're basically saying they're right. They're going to go in and look at the information and then disclose to the defense what information they need to know. And what that information probably is that somebody related to him tested positive, and they're not going to be able to test it as their relative. They're not going to be able to see the tree itself because those people are considered informants. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, Big Blue?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just moving something around. I didn't want to be too loud. But yeah, it sounds like it's not a much needed form. But what shocked me was the brother. I mean, that caught my attention right there.
Dude, when I read that, I was like, wow. They're hoping to find somebody related to Kohberger who happened to be around the King Road residence. Is he going to pull Casey Anthony and say that his dad did something to him and his dad was the one that did it?
Right. Kind of seems like it's going in that direction. But, back in 2008, there was a case where two twin brothers, one of the brothers was arrested for a murder. And they got his DNA that matched him. It matched the description. And ended up being his twin brother. The only way they told him apart that it was him is because of the fingerprint itself.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
crazy, man. So, but that's got to be a long shot here in this case, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. Drink. Just kind of reviewing everything and going through it, and then getting the questions that I have been getting. Thank you, Steelers fan, for being here for 7 months. We appreciate you.
Reloading.
Everything that everybody has been saying is suspicious. Mm-hmm. I don't find suspicious whatsoever. Oh, the judge gets to see the information, but the defense doesn't. Well, it's because the judge makes the decision whether or not they can.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they have to know what's there based on the information that they have. Basically, what they're doing is they're saying, all right, we're gonna look at it. And to be honest with you, what I think they're doing is the defense has been crying so much for this information that the state is, or the court is saying, all right, we don't want this guy to, appeal. Right. We don't want him to appeal later. We're gonna read the information and then do all the steps to do what would have been done initially. Like, I mean, think about the 1800 story and all that other crap that they came up with, right? From 1800 that this is what happened. This is what, I mean, all of this is just mud thrown on a wall and hoping something sticks. Like, they're not arguing. I haven't seen one thing that says, my client is innocent because of this. Everything that the Kohberger defense team has come forward has been basically, we want to hope to find that they did something wrong so we can get it thrown out.
Yeah, I think by the looks of it, some of us, or a lot of people, seem like to see that some of the stuff that they were doing is like kind of suspicious because of the fact of the gag order. You know what I mean?
I agree. The gag order makes it a lot more difficult. If you go and look at, there's 3 cases that we've looked into. We've looked at the Long Island serial killer. We looked at Idaho 4, and we looked at Richard Allen and Delphi murders. The 2 that have the gag orders are the 2 that are surrounded by the most conspiracy. And what you have in Long Island is a guy who worked with a detective and was doing all this stuff and trying to, assisting basically Rex Humerman, and nobody's talking about that in a way like, oh, law enforcement is bad there. And the other thing is that kind of dawned on me is this guy was trying to be a cop, Bryan Kohberger. That was his goal. He wanted to be in law enforcement. There's a lot of those, how can I say it? There's a lot of people who I would have never thought would have defended a white male trying to be a police officer. And when he has all of the everything pointing in his direction as possibly being the person involved in this case. If Bryan Kohberger would not have gotten discovered, and let's just say this case would have gone cold, Kohberger would have finished his PhD. Let's just say he turned things around. He somehow fixed his job, got his TA job back. Right. Let's just say all that happened. He gets hired somewhere else. And where was I going with that? Give me a sec. What was I saying right before that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, that if he got his job back.
Right before that. All right. So yeah, I remember now. So if he would have gotten a police job, and let's just say somebody said that he did something, right? He did something wrong, whether it was inappropriately, anything, right? And they reported him. And these individuals were to look into Bryan Kohberger's background and see that he was kicked out of school as being a security in his law enforcement class and was forced to take an HVAC class. It's not stating that the reason was females, but the HVAC class didn't have any females, that he was kicked out of his security job gig while attending DeSales University. Well, he quit, but on his resignation letter, it stated that he understood that had he not resigned, that termination was an option. So meaning he did something, and they told him either, you quit or we're going to fire you. And then they would have found out about his problems at WSU. Do you think that they would have been looking at police officer Kohberger the same way they look at him now and say, like, oh man, this guy couldn't have done it. He couldn't have done it, when there's clear examples, and all of these persons who are pro Kohberger are saying there's clear example of police corruption everywhere. Now, this guy wanted to be a police officer. That was his goal. Right? Big Blue, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're asking the genre from today, they would probably be like he's guilty if he was a police officer.
Right.
That's the feeling I would get from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Delta Bell says people aren't going to believe BK if he's guilty, even if he confesses. I agree. People won't. But at the same time, it is just crazy because, like I said, had he been a cop already, and I'm not even talking about something to the heinous crime that is the quadruple homicide. I'm talking about if there was somebody that reported him, apparently everywhere he's gone, it seems like, and we're speculating here, it seems like he had problems with females. So if he became a police officer, pulled over a girl, tried to ask her out or something, doing something inappropriate, she reported him, and then it was found out that all this was in his background, man, he would have been on every freaking YouTube channel that are defending him right now, saying that he's a dirtbag, that he's like every other cop that's out there, this, that, and a third, yada, yada, yada. And they wouldn't even have cared to have heard his story. He could have been innocent of that freaking traffic stop, right? But the thing is people are so anti-law enforcement that they're going for the guy who was trying to be law enforcement that didn't cut it. You know, that's what I see. What are your thoughts on that? Drink. You know it.
I forgot to say it. Oh.
My mute button's kind of like taking forever to unmute.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just on my side or it's StreamYard itself.
And it's probably StreamYard. My stuff's going slow too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what were you gonna say, my man?
Do you remember what you asked me? Gonna lie.
So basically, what I said was, like, you know, given everything and how Bryan Kohberger is being brought up, right, as this guy that couldn't have done it. He's a PhD student. Yeah. I had somebody tell me that in my comment section, or in our comment section, saying he's a PhD student. I couldn't believe a PhD student would make all these mistakes and do all these things wrong. I mean, there's been other PhD doctors, there's been lawyers, there's been a lot of people with a lot of education make similar mistakes.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jaime?
Well, I mean, it's one thing planning this thing out on paper and in your mind, and there's one thing doing the act. And once that act is started, there's going to be mistakes right off the bat, because it's never going to go the way you think it's going to go. You know, there's always going to be obstacles, and you know, especially in different environments, there'll be different obstacles to overcome. It's not always going to be planned like the way it was supposed to.
I can answer that question when you're done.
Oh, what's it called then? I think the mistakes weren't as big, but there's small mistakes are starting to add up.
Yeah. I mean, when you find a suspect, it's not so much the mistakes; it's the process of elimination, right? You get a person in mind and say, all right, we have this person, we'll call it John. We have John, and we think that he committed this murder over here, right? We have a specific time when this murder, took place, and we have a vehicle in which is seen on camera. Well, does John, does he where was he during that time? If he's by himself, not at home, driving around, that's suspicious, right? And, you have DNA coming up on a sheath. Like, there's just so much there. USA Kiwi 1986 says, why did they go back to the house now? I know the reason why. And what she's referring to is that FBI went back to the house earlier to do some scans and stuff to build a model. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it, Blue?
Well, I read the report. It says that they went back to they reopened the house. They have 2 days to be able to, get the measurements and the model right, because they didn't think they had enough time for the October hearing to do the replication of the, sometimes they do like little stages, little models of the houses so they can show the jury and stuff. They didn't have enough time to get it built for October, so they didn't even do it. So now that the case is getting pushed back, they went back and getting all the measurements so they can get it done. So by the time the next court hearing happens, they'll have it ready.
Jaime, what do you think? Why does the FBI go in and making models? Is it suspicious?
I think the fact that they're gonna have more time and I think it's going to have more of an impact for the jury, especially when they're trying to sketch out or the route he took through the exits and the entrance and exits. I think that's going to help a lot. Plus, I think them not demolishing the house is going to help a lot. But I don't even know if that's if they're going to do a walkthrough, if any, with the jury. I don't believe so. They're going to do the scan.
Well, the thing is, if they push it back,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be able to do a walkthrough because supposedly they're going to demolish it next year. They got a scheduled date already, like in the fall.
Mm-hmm. So here's why they're doing this. There's the real reason why. When was court supposed to have been done? October 2nd. The house is still standing. The court's been put off indefinitely as of right now. So if it happens, like look at Richard Allen, his case is 2 years by the looks of it. You know, who's to say that that building is going to be still standing at that point? So make the models, do everything you can with that uncertainty, because it may go down between now and then. If it doesn't, then you don't need them. You can take your jury out there. You know what I mean? But there's no time frame in reference to as far as when court's going to be. Terry Blue comes with a $4.99 super chat. She says, is a bazooka or a machete normal in a cop car laying out on the back seat? I heard that they got a new 3D printer. I'm asking for a friend. Laugh out loud. I don't think so, unless they arrested somebody and are transporting that weapon. You know, I've transported many machetes in the back of a police car multiple times because they were used in crimes. But if it's a case that you're seeing and it's big, it's probably an AR or an M16 or some sort of long rifle. The officers typically carry those, or even a shotgun, and the case is just kind of big and it looks like something it's not. What do you guys think? Start off with you, Big Blue.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, I would say it depends on what kind of cops they are. You know, if it's it might look like a bazooka, but if it's like the SWAT team, you know, they have the door knocker. I can't remember what they call them, but the one that they slam against the door kind of looks like a bazooka. It could be that what you're seeing. And then the machete, I mean, yeah, there's some cops that might have that as part of one of their normal, I would say, utilities that they use, because there's like park police and stuff like that. They had the clear brush when they're looking for certain things. So it just depends on what department they work at.
Right. And you bring up an excellent point, Blue, because the department I worked at was a municipality, so I didn't have to deal with woods or brush or things of that nature. But this is in rural Idaho. You know, they may need to go in somewhere and they utilize a machete. 100%. 100%. So Slow Ride Over Landing says, my question to Drunk Turkey is, if you were on trial, would you blindly accept informants' information and not think you should know the what and the who? The thing is, there's a lot of people in jail that don't know the what and the who because of informants. You know, you have especially when it comes to like drug related cases, you'll have people come forward and just kind of tell an officer or tell a detective, or even, you know, write in a tip saying, hey, go look at John Doe. He's selling dope at his house. Now, the officer can either take that information and go sit on that house and see if there's any activity there that would point to the direction of it being utilized in that manner. And if there is, you watch it, you document it, you pull over a couple vehicles, you get them to talk after you search their vehicles, and then you go get a warrant and you go and arrest. You search the house, you find something, then you arrest the guy. Now, when that case goes to trial, do you think that one tip that didn't have a name or a number or anything that somebody called in saying, hey, go look at this house, is going to be on there? No, because they didn't use it. They didn't utilize any of it against the person in trial. What they used against the person in trial was the mere fact that they surveilled the house, saw the activity, based on that activity, made a stop, got an arrest, got a probable cause for a search warrant on the bigger fish, searched that house, and then got another arrest. That's a good case. So just because it's blind and this, that, and a third, it's unfortunate. Not really unfortunate. I think it's actually the right thing. You know, if somebody says something to somebody or comes forward in some way that, you know, one, that information is not strong enough, because I can guarantee you there are way more tips that are out there, even for murder cases. I mean, how many tips have come in for John Benet Ramsey and there hasn't been an arrest, right? Because it's more than just the tip. It has to be the evidence that goes behind it. You have to make a case. And I think people are failing to understand that aspect is just because somebody has information or knows something, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And if you can prove it legally.
I mean,
right?
look at all the other big cases that they can't prove anything on and file charges against. I mean, the Clintons, Epstein.
You're trying to get us demonetized real quick.
Biden's son.
That's it. We're done.
If we start flashing out and things start blinking, we know why. We know why, Blue.
Hey,
we know why.
They can't stop me now. I got the truth serum in me.
You got the truth serum. Jeez. That's the worst thing to give to Big Blue. You don't want to know what's crawling in his brain. So,
no, not at all. Been there. Don't like it.
For sure. So, I don't think any of the stuff that police or law enforcement are doing in this case is as suspicious as it's being portrayed out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
I think them working, it's kind of like they're working backwards, right? And like by the time we get to where they're at, we already have all this speculation, especially with, like I said, with the gag order.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, and like I mentioned before, the gag order, I think in this case needs to be lined up a little bit. That way there can be a lot of this misinformation died down, right? You can go in there and say, hey, this isn't true. You know, you probably can't go in there and say what is true, but if there is some sort of like outlandish theory that's building up steam and police can kind of shut it down, or law enforcement or whoever, even if it's against the defendant, if there's like some sort of story that's building up steam, like for instance, the stuff that's been reported about Bryan Kohberger, the fact that he had lost his job as the security guard and or not lost his job, but was forced to resign. If not, he would have been terminated. If that wasn't fake or other things that weren't real, him and his defense team should be able to come out and say, hey, that's not true. You know what I mean? And if they want to say what is true, it's his right. I wouldn't recommend him talking if I was his lawyer, but if he wants to talk, let him talk. Let's see. True Dreamer, we saw the dark truck driving at that time in the surveillance video. I'm not sure what y'all talking about.
Which video?
I don't know. All right. Dreamer says he wasn't the only one driving around that morning, and we don't know whose phones were in the area because Ellie didn't tell us. He wasn't the only one driving. Right. No, I understand that. But, out of those that were driving, how many others had their DNA on a knife sheath under the victim's under a victim's body? Right. I mean, there's more to it than just driving around. How many other people that were driving around were driving a white Elantra without a front license plate? Mm-hmm. How many other people that were driving around driving said white Elantra, said license plate, are about 6 foot, athletically built with bushy eyebrows from the area? I mean, there's what's that?
Let alone the timeline.
The timeline, then how many other people are driving around at that time, turned their phone off, just so happened to turn it back on after the murders?
Yeah, there had to be too many coincidences for that one.
Exactly.
It's like having a twin brother. Like even if the defense says that he has a twin brother somewhere, right? Like it's up to the state to prove that that's not the case, right?
Yeah, it's up to the state to say. I mean, maybe. I mean, at this point, they're using this information saying that this is the guy. They even put it like 5 octillion or whatever. This is the dude.
Yeah.
So, I would have thought that they would have thought that, hey, the DNA sample is too small, or it was contaminated somewhere or some form. It's not his because of this. They're not denying that the DNA comes from either him or somebody closely related to him. They're just saying that it could have been somebody closely related, and they want to see if they followed up on that. Like, did they go and see if Bryan Kohberger's, first cousin was in Idaho at that time, November 13th? All right. Now, what do we know about Kohberger's family? Some of them are in Nevada, some in California,
Yeah.
a lot of them in some in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and they all drive white Elantras with the missing front license plate.
Right. And this person says, I thought they had already made a 3D of the crime scene. I don't know if they made a 3D almost a year now, and the FBI decides to do this. It's not strange. And the reason being is because, the trial should have happened by now. And if trial would have happened by now, they would have had the opportunity to have the jurors and go in there and walk the house. Well, now that the trial has been suspended indefinitely, we don't know when it's going to happen. There's the possibility that house could be demolished. So while you're waiting, get the model done just in case it ends up being a year and a half down the road before this trial actually takes place.
And from what I read, it wasn't just a 3D printing that they might do. They might do, like a, how they build the little sound stages, like a little stage replica of the areas. And since right now it's still empty, everything got emptied out, all the furniture, it gives them a perfect timing to be able to get all the right measurements without having to move all the furniture.
Yeah. And, like I said, I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that the house is probably going to get demolished before trial happens. I know that the families are saying that it's supposed to be staying up, this, that, but at the end of the day, they've tried to demolish it a few times.
Well, the university is adamant about it.
Yeah. No, the university has a date set. That's what I read on that report I read today. Somewhere in the fall, I think, or spring, like next year. It said 2024.
It just said that it wasn't going to happen this semester.
Yeah, it's going to be.
But they intend on it. Yeah, they intend on having it done. And so if you have it done, and the intention initially was to have the jury walk through the house, and now that this could potentially be destroyed before trial, well, you're going to want to have the best representation of the house, so you build this amazing 3D model. I mean, it just sounds logical to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it would be better to, keep the place until trial, and that way jury can walk through. But I think it will hold more. Yeah, it will hold a lot more. Let's say, like, you can see it better. Yeah, more weight and to actually be there.
Yeah,
experience that. It's just a whole different story.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think that walking through there would give, one, just knowing the heinousness of the crime. If you're walking up the stairs and you're knowing that you're tracing the footsteps of the killer, and knowing that this house has been basically boarded up, for the last, I don't know how many years, outside of law enforcement that have gone up and down there, the killer was one of the last few people to do that. So if you're a juror and you're walking up those stairs and it's dark, and you're hearing the floor creak, the hair will stand up on your arms. It's a very powerful moment. And if you're seeing residue of like blood and things of that nature of where it was, that's also pretty powerful in my opinion. What's up, Big Blue?
Yeah. I say what I think they should do is the prosecution should ask for, like a scheduled day where they can go into the house and record the sounds, how it would sound if somebody's walking up the stairs, how would it sound if somebody screamed from the other bedrooms, and have like recordings from every bedroom, so that way the jurors have something to listen to, like, hey, this is, even if you whisper something in the other room, you could have heard it, Well, that would be really good evidence to have if they destroy the house.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm pretty sure it's emptied out. You know what I mean? Like, it'll be a whole different, like, the way it will sound, the from room to room will be a whole different story, especially when there's stuff in there.
You're right.
But I don't know. I mean, knowing that there's 6 people in there. I'm sure first floor would be able to hear at least second, maybe not third, but second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And second to third.
Yeah, you would think that you would be able to, and by the sounds of it,
Mhm.
from all the information that's come out, that they were able to hear some sort of sound. It sounds like, obviously Dylan was woken up by the commotion. She was asleep, and it was loud enough for her to wake up and to stay awake,
Yeah,
and to hear certain things. So, yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
It's like they heard whispers. I mean, she heard a whisper, but not the commotion of a struggle. Trying to fend for their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure.
I don't
The
think it
house is.
was. Oh,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Blue.
I was gonna read, say with this comment. I don't think the house was that destroyed after the police were done with it. They might have cut some sheetrock out or something, but it was a renovated home, so they would have already taken all that sheetrock and asbestos out.
That's true, but like Steve said, and if you guys haven't seen, we had a interview with a real retired CSI
Mhm.
investigator, and we asked him the question about the contaminants in the house and stuff. And he said that if it was to the point where there is a safety concern,
Yeah,
right, for the jury and for anybody going in and out, to be in there for an extended period of time, probably without, protection, means that they checked that entire damn house and they threw chemicals everywhere to try to figure out every piece of evidence that they could.
yeah. I wonder, how long it will take for all those chemicals to, like, to lose their strength, so to be able to go in there without, masks and stuff.
Mass to dissipate.
To disappear.
Yeah, I mean, most of them won't be too long, but I don't know.
Yeah, and when it comes to the house being demolished, I mean, like I said, it's putting a jury in there and seeing like the stuff that they cut out or taken off. They'll give it a different feel, and especially like I believe like houses itself holds some kind of energy, right?
Yeah.
I think that will also be something that they can experience themselves.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Tim Collins says, has the defense entered the decision or discussion over the demolition? Yeah, they're for it. They wanted to be demolished as well. They know you, Blue. They know
he's
you.
on it. He's on it.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm gonna move this over to this screen where it's bigger so I can see what
And
I'm over
I
here
did want to
straining.
say, happy, I guess, belated Halloween to everybody. And I wanted to correct something I said the other day. I said Dia de los Muertos had already passed, but it was today. So my bad.
I thought it was. I
He's
thought it
spreading
was.
misinformation, sir.
I know, that's why I'm correcting it today. And like I saw too many ofrendas today, and today's the day.
3D tech is supposed to be done when the bodies are still there. Judge may throw out what they're. I don't think that's accurate, man. I don't think that's accurate at all.
I think when they scan the house itself, they can actually, put where certain blood pools were at, right? Pools of blood were at, or even maybe footsteps or different kind of evidence that they found, right, on those scans. Or it's just like literally just the house itself. No, they can't put in the stuff under.
I'm sure
the
that
body location.
right. I'm sure with those 3D scans, they probably can do a lot. I think maybe just the layout is probably going to be the most accurate. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to insert furniture and stuff like that. I mean, but then again, with today's technology, you can make freaking, Joe Rogan, say that he loves your podcast. So, it's, it's, with technology today, I wouldn't see why it would be an issue. Let it stay up in price. How he did it with the facts they gave us. Should want it up if the theory is fact and show the jury. Yeah. Let's see.
Hmm.
If he was all masked up with heavy coveralls, and then I doubt there would be DNA under fingernails. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that there wasn't DNA under the fingernails. And the reason being is the DNA that they're utilizing to test against Bryan Kohberger is touch DNA on the sheath on the knife sheath. And in my opinion, if they had DNA under the fingernails or blood somewhere, that would be way more stronger evidence, and the DNA would be more reliable in court to utilize against Kohberger or any defendant. And I think that would have been the DNA that they would have used. The fact that they're using touch DNA off a knife sheath leads me to believe that that's the only DNA evidence that they have. Pretty odd they went there on Halloween. I mean, maybe. Like, things happen, though, on holidays. Law doesn't stop. Crime don't stop for the day.
It's not a federal holiday, so they only got 2 days, the 31st and the 1st. That's all they had to be able to do their stuff where they put the boards back up.
Mm-hmm. There's no rest for the wicked.
True story.
We're almost coming up to a year, man. 1 year, so that's crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Donald says, you thinking this trial lasts 6 months or less? I think it's probably going to go about 6 weeks once it starts. I don't know as far as when they start. I mean, right now it's indefinitely suspended while they do all this. I'm assuming once everything gets finished, it'll probably be about a 6 month time frame because they've had all the evidence and everything to go through. I would say 4 to 6 months once everything has been cleared out with the IGG and what they're going to utilize in court and what they're not. Yeah, about 4 to 6 months is when it'll start. Oh, leave D alone. Somebody want to mess with me? There's an alley back here. My opinion, they did 3D imaging with the bodies in the house. Maybe. I don't know anything about the 3D imaging or how it's utilized or the technology or how it works or the technology that's required, if it's a handheld device, I don't know anything about it. So I'm not sure if they would have done it with the bodies in there, if it would have contaminated the bodies, if so. So I'm not sure. Can I get a perfect pic? Can I get a perfect picture of people going 70 miles an hour on a roller coaster, but can't get one of BK's car and or a license plate? Well, I mean, there's some video there of the Linda Lane footage, right? We've seen that video, and there's a screenshot of 1112 King Road of their camera, and there's cars parked stationary in front of them, and you can't see the license plate because it's dark. You know, the camera systems that are utilized in neighborhoods and, you know, for houses aren't state of the art, so to speak. And that's probably why when it is described like the route that Kohberger allegedly went, you know, from one neighborhood to another and going through the neighborhoods, it's probably for that reason, knowing that that technology isn't something that you can enhance, something that you can use against them, to that, you know, clarification. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. Every time I walk by my Ring camera, when I see the footage, it looks like I got stung by 1,000 bees, man. It looks so big. Wait, it's also the same way I look in the mirror.
Blue.
It's all HD.
Yeah. Maybe FBI went back for another 2 DNA. That I doubt it. So the other 2 DNA samples or whatever, they were collected and they were what's the word I'm looking for? They were sent into Codex without a match. All right. So they have it. They have the profiles. They can just hand it over to the defense. And if the defense wants to run their test or go get send it off to their genealogist, what is their name? Vargas, the one that they use on their defense team. And, you know, they can point to another person based on that because they have the ability. Nobody's stopping them from doing that. All right. I mean, the only thing they don't have is the workups, but apparently they have the profiles that were submitted to CODIS. So you got them. Go test them yourself. let's see. Are cops allowed to call the time of death? No, they're not. That is from a magistrate, judge. There has to be an inquest. I believe that's what it's called. Blue, correct me if I'm wrong. There has to be something called an inquest where a professional goes out there. If it's something like this, it's usually the justice of the peace will go out there, or the coroner, and they'll just say that this is where they died and the potential cause of death, based on what they see. It's not something that is should take the place of, like, for instance, an autopsy, because it's just like a visual representation of the scene, and you're like, all right. And the information that they use in that is relied heavily on police information. So they, usually, and when I've been involved in something like that, the JP will come in and say, hey, what happened? All right, well, we have stab wounds. We have a broken glass window over there. It appears somebody broke in, and this is a homicide by stabbing. All right, boom, put it in their notes, and that's what it is. The person that does the autopsy is the one who can say for sure, what happened. Is that correct, Big Blue?
Yeah, most likely, yes. But there is sometimes where, like, remember we were talking to, she came on as a guest. I'm trying to remember her name. She was telling me that there is some places where they're so small that they don't have a coroner. So, like you said, sometimes it's like a doctor or a judge has to, the justice of the peace might be the ones that have to officially document it. But in a hospital setting, somebody put a nurse, I believe maybe in a hospital setting, a nurse can write down the time of death, but they don't sign the death certificate.
Yeah, 100%. If the dude was innocent, he would have fought that nothing will leave that home, and it wouldn't be destroyed. That's all right. Medics can call time of death, but not when it's a clear homicide. See, because from what I understand is, like, there's been times where a paramedic will pick up a body or a person and they die en route to the hospital. I don't think that you can correct me, Blue, but the doctor doesn't come out there and do anything, because then they would have to provide the inquest. And since the body or the person never made it to the hospital, from my experience, they usually call like a judge.
They probably sometimes they might bring them in, and the DOA is dead on arrival, and sometimes you just have to check one last pulse, and then they don't take them to the emergency room. They take them more towards, like, it depends on how big the ER is,
Mm-hmm.
They take them to the wherever the coroner is, or wherever they take the deceased.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie Jung, for your $1.99 super sticker. We appreciate it. Lex Luthor, he's a POS. He did it. I mean, I think he did it. I mean,
straight to the point, right? Straight to the point.
Like, I mean, the arguments that he has are freaking out there. They're as wild as the conspiracy theories that need to take place for him to be innocent. I'm talking about, going back to 1880, then finding a secret evil twin brother. Like, come on now, man. Like, how does Blue's favorite president say it? Come on, man. Like, Terry Blue asks, $1.99, Big Blue, what is your medical title? He is CFO of 14 hospitals. Is that correct?
No.
He's the guy into the stars.
There he is. What would you say your title is? If you want to give it out, you don't have to.
I mean, when I say my daughter, no, I'm a medical assistant. I'm also a licensed NCT, and I'm also working on 2 more. So I got a few titles. I'm working on 2 more. Hopefully by the end of next year, I'll have my other 2 that I'm working on.
Yeah, good deal, man. Good luck. We'll be there 100% of the way. Mark says, Duty Ron covered the original CSI on his show a few times. They collected a ton of evidence inside and outside of the house. Yeah, I agree. Grunger says they had the sheep DNA back in 2012. They could have done more DNA now. I mean, 2022. I'm sorry, not.
I was going to say, like, damn, that's how long this happened ago. Jesus.
Yeah. The 8-hour delay in calling 911 will set Bryan free, in my opinion. I don't think so. You know, if it comes to find out that these girls were very shaken up, and we find out and we see, you know, there's, I guess, maybe an interview tape that comes out in court, and you can see, you know, how vividly shaken they are. I don't think that it's going to be as big of a situation as many people are thinking right now. Oh, wow. Terra Blue was a CMA for 26 years. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, I'm going on 20 years for the same company. So I'm going for a change. We'll see how next year goes.
Yeah. Chad Daybell has been in jail since 2020. Yeah. Let's see. If you guys have any questions, just throw them out there. We'll answer them. So Big Blue, just to play devil's advocate with all the information that is out there, what do you think would be Bryan Kohberger's most likely best defense to go against this outside of the evil brother and the 1880 stuff? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm going. So the best defense to say it wasn't him, I would say the DNA to me is in my head, way stuck in there. So I would say his best defense would be he sold that knife sheath at a pawn shop or something, or at a yard sale, or threw it away. Hey, what if a bum picked it up and committed this crime?
A bum with a white Elantra without a front license plate?
I know that's the only thing they got him on right now. Without the DNA, you could say he was out driving that night. He was out for a stroll.
He was driving.
I know, and
put himself there. Not at the scene, but like at least driving around.
He put himself in his car.
Yeah, if that's the case, I think the best thing to do was to make it, make sure that it's a habit of his to be driving around. You know what I mean? To prove at least that, and man, I don't know. Besides, I can't go with the evil twin brother, unfortunately, which would be pretty cool though. I ain't gonna lie. Imagine that would be like a M. Night Shyamalan twist again.
Yeah, if he's seen on camera, it's not only an evil twin brother, but a doppelganger.
Yeah, I think his best bet would have been that he had somewhat of a connection with the victims, right? That way he could put himself at some party or something. But they already said that he had no connection, that he had no reason to be there. You know what I mean?
Somebody else,
so now his DNA's there.
Shotgun a beer. Only problem is I don't have no more beer, man.
Shotgun some whiskey. Break the glass. Imagine.
I'll take a shot for your birthday. How about that? I'll open up a bottle and I'll take a shot.
I'll get it right now. So, when you brought up something, first and foremost, I can't remember what it was, Jaime. The first thing you said, for his defense. What was it? The very first one. Because I think it was something that a lot of people bring up. And I wanted to answer it. Is it taking forever to unmute?
Since I am off today, here, let me take a shot real quick.
All right. We can't hear you, Jaime.
Heard the cork pop and everything. Salud.
Salud.
Look at that. Woodford Reserve. Some good stuff there.
Good deal. Let's see. The security cameras I work with a state of my boss's budget. Not bad, high res, but can't get license plates. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of folks are looking at like TV stuff, like CSI and things of that nature. and are trying to incorporate those tools that they use on the show with real life. And those things are very much dramatized and not real in most cases. What about the cowboys that dropped by in the middle of the night? Well, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know when the FBI went out there, but cowboys in the middle of the night, first and foremost, I think those were investigators, probably from Idaho State Police. In Texas, our Texas police officers, their CID division, their criminal investigation division, or detectives, they utilize clothes that are very similar to that. So it's probably that. It's a rural area, and law enforcement utilize that
Like
quite a bit in rural
troopers?
areas. Yeah, 100%.
State police. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, there we go. I had to jump out. I don't know what was going on. Everything froze on my end. But I think the first thing was about the habits, the driving habits.
Yeah. The driving. Oh, perfect. So here's the problem with the driving habits is, let's just say they show him driving around, even in the back area where he was supposedly had gone to after the murders, right? Where he's alleged to have traveled. If they have that evidence there that for, when did he get there? In July? So July, August, September, October, November. So let's just say he got pulled over in August, I believe. So they're saying that from August is when he started doing that they can say that he started doing it. So August, September, October, November, 4 months. What does the probable cause affidavit state? It states that on November, on November 13th at 9:30 a.m., Kohberger went back to the residence. On November 14th, he connected to a tower in Moscow, but was not in Moscow. And he has not been there since. So if he had this pattern of driving around the victim's house, parking outside of the victim's house, or driving this exaggerated trip down the back roads of Moscow, Idaho into Washington, why did it stop after the murders?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
there's a lot of things he did even after the murders happened that were kind of suspicious. Especially taking that trip, even though it was already partly planned, taking that trip back to his hometown made him look suspicious, right? Cleaning his car at the middle of the night or whatever, throwing trash in someone else's trash can made him look suspicious. I mean, even his family was questioning the thing about his gloves. Yeah. So
allegedly,
yeah. So there's things that show some that's a thing that's real suspicious. I mean, if it wasn't for his name being tethered with this murder, you wouldn't need to think nothing about it, right? About those kind of actions.
I mean, from the outside, I guess. But if somebody found out, like, hey, I used to see Bryan Kohberger leave throughout the all hours of night, and let's just say it's like a neighbor, and then he hasn't done it since the murders, and he was out that night because I didn't see his car after a certain period or whatever the case may have been, then that kind of says something different, So doesn't BK's sister live over there near 1122? No, I believe both of them. One of them lived in New Jersey, and the other one lived in Pennsylvania. Thank you for your 8 months of membership. We appreciate that. Yeah, no, his sisters lived on the East Coast. Let's see. In my opinion, the way they gave the defense the other two DNA, that he violation of those DNA owners' rights. Not necessarily. I mean, if they were found directly, not directly, because that's not what it says. It says they were found in the area, right, in the general area of where the bodies were located. Based on everything that we've seen from Ann Taylor, going out there talking about the 3 DNAs, talking about one in a glove outside, why weren't they more descriptive of where the other 2 were? Is it because it was probably a lot further away from the actual crime scene? Maybe perhaps on a dresser or on a wall somewhere 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 feet away from the actual scene of the crime.
I wonder what the radius would be for like a search.
Oh, well, according to Steve, if they're, and I'm not talking about Steve Goncalves, I'm talking about Steve, the CSI guy. According to Steve, if there was ample amount of chemicals to the point where they had to, they're not, that it's a danger for jurors to go inside, then they probably search the entire house.
Yeah, but besides the house, I know they did a thorough search through the house, but like, how far from the house on the outside would they search?
I mean,
it might be things that they picked up that wasn't even related to the scene itself, right?
yeah, obviously. I mean, there was 150 people out there that area, and more in that area the night before, right? There was a huge party, and you had not just that party, but we know from people that we have talked to who are University of Idaho students who were in that area the night before the incident, who were attending a party, not at that house, but a couple of houses down the street, and that entire block was filled with students because they were having a couple of ceremonies, a couple of the fraternities were doing certain things, and there was huge parties going on. So there's a lot of people out there the night before in that vicinity, in the street, in the probably even in the backyards. I would expect. And to answer your question, Tara, who called the time of death at the Idaho 4? That was on the death certificate. You know, there had to be some work done on that death certificate. I mean, to figure out when the time of death was, you know, and that would have had to have come. They probably had the initial time of death, the time of when the bodies were discovered, but then that is changed when the actual the person performing the autopsy gives their time of death. Am I wrong, Big Blue?
Yeah, it can change depending on when they do the autopsy sometimes. And if I remember right, there was a conspiracy in the beginning on the person who did the first time of death because she wasn't a coroner. She was like a part-time lawyer, part-time.
She was a coroner, but she was like an elected coroner.
Yeah,
that didn't have like the medical stuff behind her.
She didn't have an MD behind her.
Right.
And she was also like a lawyer, but there's counties where they're so small they don't have like people get elected to those positions and they don't have to have the PhD or MD, but they do get trained. They just don't have those other higher educations.
Yeah.
And then I think they brought a coroner from somewhere else to do the autopsies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true and that's accurate. You know, when it comes to this coroner, Blue, I want to ask you this question real quick. Does the inexperience of the coroner, who really had nothing to do with the investigation, didn't do the autopsy, didn't touch anything, didn't collect evidence, didn't process evidence, does her opinion really make a difference in this case, or would point to Bryan Kohberger's innocence? I don't think so.
Not to his innocence, no. I mean, the most she would probably do is just verify that they're passed, and then it just turns into an investigation from the police department from there. And then the autopsies are the ones that are going to verify how and which stab wounds, because they, to find the stab wounds, sometimes they do CT scans and ultrasounds to see how deep they went, what they cut into. So they do a lot of stuff to the bodies after they pass, especially for that type of injuries they received.
Yeah. Tara Lee says, I always think he did it, but then Drip Drop got me scratching my head sometimes. Drip Drop comes up with some great stuff. The fact that he was able to put, Jack DeCore living down the street, that was good. I mean, we did the same thing. But, he put it out there as well. So, he's done some good work, but then he's also put out some things that make me scratch my head. Like, for instance, possibility of Bryan Kohberger jumping out of a plane and parachuting down onto the third floor balcony and then committing the crime. Just really doesn't stick with me as logical. What do you guys think?
He would be one hell of a parachuter to be able to make it onto that balcony, man.
Well, he was a Green Beret.
I mean, at that rate of speed, he might land on the house. With it being icy, you'd see
That
I
is,
don't know.
yeah, that's a crazy thought.
Mhm.
I think first of all, just because he's a Green Beret doesn't mean you have access to a plane.
That's true. He did jump out of planes in his military career, but does he have access to a plane today? That is a very good question. And then who's driving that plane? Who's flying it? Because I'm not sure if he's flying the plane and jumping out of it at the same time.
It's Kohberger.
Because we would have known. maybe that's why his phone was off. He was in the air, right?
Airplane mode.
You don't get the greatest service when you're 10,000 feet above the floor, above the ground.
Airplane mode, man. Airplane mode.
The airplane mode, man. Things are starting to make sense. What about Quinn DM's boyfriend? That I don't know what Huda showed with the busted lip, as well as the video everyone was watching at the grub truck. So, if he had a busted lip from and he was involved somewhere in this crime, that would indicate that he would have had blood bleeding on him during the process of the commission of the crime. They didn't find anybody's blood, my man. So that leads me to believe that if he had a busted lip, it didn't come from there. And if he did, and it was from there, there'd be evidence of said busted lip, right? What would be the purpose for law enforcement to say, you know what? We don't want to look at this guy who's a drug dealer, who's dating one of the surviving victims, who they took 8 hours to call. You know, we're not going to look at this blood DNA that's on this scene. We're going to disclose that in an effort, because of pressure of the University of Idaho, to get an arrest. We're going to arrest a PhD student from WSU because, well, that's a rival college, right? It's a rival college, so you go arrest somebody from there. That doesn't make sense. Kathy Madbutt, the Lake Talk County coroner, is an RN and also a lawyer. She didn't perform autopsies. No, she didn't. It was a tiny amount of DNA. There won't be any left. Well, the thing is, the STR profile, and let me pull that back up real quick. Let me pull it up so I can tell you exactly what it stands for. Let me find it real quick. There it is. All right. So it is called the short tandem repeat, meaning that they have enough DNA that they can repeat the sequence and create multiple copies of said DNA and spread it around. You don't need very much either to create that said copy. Kohberger is a good suspect for this murder. Doesn't mean he's automatically guilty, just that the evidence points in his direction. I agree. I mean, we don't know all the evidence, right? So we can't say without 100% certain of a doubt that he is guilty. And that's not something that we have said either. We think he did it. We haven't seen all the evidence. And Bryan Kohberger's defense hasn't had the opportunity to, argue the evidence that has been placed against him. So we need to see those things. And yeah, we can make our decision afterwards. But based on the information they have, me personally, I think they have enough.
I was brought up as a theory that somebody else put out there, but we don't think he was ever involved in this case.
Yeah. We never thought he was.
Yeah.
You won't find a video saying Brent Kopaka or any of those things because we never found the connection. And when it came to like the framing aspect and the reasoning behind the framing was solely because of pressure behind the University of Idaho. One, out of the documents that we've already read, it talks about the fact that the FBI did most of the work. I don't think the FBI gives a damn about the University of Idaho and Moscow and how much money they're losing or making, right? That's the first thing. And, two, I can't remember. What Hyman has to get going. He's going to be taking off. We appreciate you being here, my man. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Y'all take care. Have a good night.
You take care,
too,
man.
My man.
See you next time.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah. On the state to prove a case, remember, so no need to rip it down. It's important to keep the scene to do that, in my opinion. I agree. You having problems leaving? They had to turn over the 911 tape to the defense. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have it. What if the survivors saw carnage or something and ran back to their rooms and were scared to make any noise or come out? That's possible. I don't think so, though. So here's the reason why, Lex. So we spoke to Kaylee Goncalves. She stated to us that Hunter Johnson had spoken to her husband and had basically told him that he had received a call from the girls and that he went over and that he attempted to make entry into the second floor bedroom, which was Xana's bedroom, and was unable to because a body was blocking the door. So from what I also understand from other sources and media outlets and things of that nature, that the crime scenes were contained to their specific bedrooms. So if somebody walked out of the said room, their bedrooms, and walked into the living area and or the hallway, then there was nothing there. Everything was contained to the rooms. Now we have Xana's mom coming out on a podcast here recently and saying that her husband had in fact changed the locks to her bedroom. So what that tells me is, and my theory was, that Bryan Kohberger had made entry into the rear sliding glass door. One of the reasons or one of the motivations in this case was to get away with it, right? It may not have been the only motivation, but one of the motivations was to get away with it. And, knowing his profile, his expertise, and whatever you want to call it, given the fact that I suspect and believe that the rear sliding glass door remained open from the time that Kohberger entered the residence the first time. All right. I'm not saying he entered it twice, but what I'm saying is as he left the residence, it was still open. And what I think happened is that maybe perhaps Xana heard some noise and or maybe felt a draft of how cold it was, got up, went to the living room or that area, saw that the glass door was open. The rear sliding glass door said, I think someone's here, turns around to walk back to her room where Ethan is already asleep. She opens the door and gets in because remember, it has locks that automatically lock behind her. And as she's walking in, she gets surprised from behind. Right? Boom, gets attacked. Ethan may be possibly waking up at that time. If he is, he has a guy equipped with a 7.5-inch blade over him at that point, and him and not in the best position to defend himself. If you have two female, victims on the third floor who were intoxicated, heavily intoxicated, there's video that shows that, and asleep at the time of the attack, and you have one person walking in and you attack from behind, and the other person is maybe barely just waking up and you're armed with a 7.5-inch knife, that would be a reason why there's none of his skin cells. There was no scratching. There was no blood cells. There's none of those things were on scene because basically every single one of those attacks were by surprise. Big Blue, what do you think? You're muted.
Yeah. I think with the sound of, they would have, with a roommate that was awake or got woken up by the disturbance, she would have heard more screaming. So I think when this might have happened, one of them was probably asleep. And then she woke up for a brief second, maybe, got jolted and woke up the other one. And then he ended up having to, keep struggle with both. But as the way, I haven't seen exactly where they were punctured, you know what I mean? But if you take quick, big arteries, maybe the heart, places you bleed out quickly. I mean, a few seconds, maybe a minute or two, and you're done. So, especially if you know where to hit.
Yeah. Norma says the knife. They had a knife and an axe throwing contest that weekend. I'm not sure where the connection is. I mean, I understand that the victims were knifed, but I mean, there's a knife and axe place here in town, 13th floor, I think. You throw an axe or a knife at a wall, and it's competition. Doesn't mean anybody that goes in there is automatically some sort of psycho, right?
Yeah. And K-bar knives are not really the knives that they use for that.
This one's another logical. It could have been a clone. It could have been a clone. The defense, I wouldn't say that out loud though, Tim, because defense might be pulling that out in their next hearing. Oh man. For all we know, he may have borrowed another car or knew a neighbor to shower. More to come at trial, I hope, in my opinion. So, just to kind of add on to the borrowed a car. All right, how long had Bryan Kohberger been there, Blue? A few months?
2 months.
So apparently his father had to ask people to be his friends. Didn't seem like he had very many. If he did, where do you think he would have met his friends, being new to the area?
I mean, being new to the area, probably at the school where he worked at, maybe try to make friends with other teachers. But even at that, he was an awkward person. So, from what they say,
So if he would have made a friend, it would have been probably from the school. Now, where did he teach? What subject was he teaching and in?
Criminal justice.
So those people that are in that class, what do you think that they want to do when they get out of college?
They want to be lawyers, police, and work in the judicial system. So other parts.
So do you think that if one of these persons had a white Elantra that just so happened to look exactly, or let's reframe this. So do you think that if Bryan Kohberger told himself, I need to get another car. I can't take my car. I got to get somebody else's car. Do you think Bryan Kohberger would have gone and asked his fellow criminal justice students and teachers if they would lend him his car, and maybe not perhaps tell him why? But don't you think that they would have felt a little bit suspicious when the night they lent Bryan or whoever their car, that somebody went and killed 4 people? You don't think that would have been brought up, especially based on who it is? All right. So what is the other way that somebody could take another vehicle that doesn't belong to them? Because apparently that's the way you get away with murder. You have to take somebody else's car.
You can rent one on Toro.
Well, don't you think that there is a paper trail of that?
It would be, unless you make a fake account. But even at that, you have to be pretty good to make a fake account.
Now, even if that were to be true,
and insurance.
Blue, if you had a white Elantra and you were a Turo, you rented out your vehicle, then you rent out your white Elantra during a specific time, and during that specific time there's a murder that occurs with 4 students. You're not gonna call the cops, say, hey, my white Elantra on December 7th, when it comes out that there's a white Elantra, I don't think that person would call it in. I think so.
They have a conscience, yeah. I mean, there's some people that probably turn a blind eye and don't even know half the stuff about this case sometimes.
The guy's renting out an Elantra. Like, how much money do you get renting out an Elantra on a day-to-day basis that he's concerned that his business is going to be affected if he calls in? It's not very much. Then there's the thought, all right, maybe he stole it, right? That's the other thought, right? Stealing the car. Well, then you have to get away with 2 crimes, the theft and the murders.
What if he borrowed it and returned it on the same day? Because all you need to steal an Elantra is a USB.
Oh, I get it. So, but if that were the case, and people assume that there's supposed to be a tremendous amount of blood in this car. If you woke up and you went out to your vehicle and it was stolen and it was brought back, you open the door and there's just blood everywhere, because supposedly it's supposed to have blood everywhere, wouldn't you call cops?
Yeah. See, here's the thing though. As smart as, if I'm saying if it is him, because of course we're just talking theories. If it is him, as smart as he is, he would have changed before he got into the car, even if it was a rental. Because you don't want to lead anything back to you. Or if you borrowed on the Toro, you would clean it. But like if it's his car, he would have cleaned it. He would have. I guarantee you, he probably had booties on. He probably, changed right before he got into the car real quick. It takes a second to take a booty off on each foot. You just pull and flip.
But this murder happened at 4 a.m. if he's trying to return the vehicle back that he stole cleaned, he also, drove this weird route or whatever. But let's just say that it was somebody else, right? They left at 4 a.m. They would have had to have cleaned it and hope that the person that they stole the vehicle wouldn't have noticed it that Sunday morning, and hope that they weren't, church going people that get up at 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, which apparently this town is super, there's this church that everybody goes to and it's super religious. So, right. They would have to hope that person doesn't notice, and that, it's also cold, right? It was 29 degrees, wet materials don't really dry in the cold very quickly. So, person wakes up, opens their car door, it's unlocked or it's locked and whatever. They sit in it, it's damp. Like, I just feel like, and then a few, like maybe 3 weeks later, they're saying that they're looking for a white Elantra that looks like yours, and you're not going to bring it up. You're not going to say, hey, I had this car, I think someone stole it. For one, that sounds not logical, but let's just say it is.
My question is, what I know that one of his students came out saying, or one of the students in the class came out saying that he would talk to them about the case. You know what I mean? I wonder what the conversations were and what he would respond to them.
Right.
It was a topic he'd bring up sometimes during class.
Yeah. Angel D says, Daniel, the PCA says suspect vehicle 1 attempted to park or turn around outside of 1122. Where'd they get it from? Surveillance camera from the King Road residence that was somewhere there. In fact, I got a picture from Mikey. Shout out to Mikey. He sent me a picture. It was actually across the street from the King Road residence where the victims' lives were taken, that there is a camera out there that points to the King Road residence. Or not to it, but to the street. Let's see. I'd seen something else. Only one had a cowboy hat. Well, I mean, it's not mandatory that they have to wear a cowboy hat. It's not mandatory they have to wear a hat. It's just that in those places, or in rural places, if a detective is going out there, and you can wear a baseball hat. I've seen that multiple times. So it's a little bit different when it comes to being a detective out there or investigating a crime. It could have been marshals, it could have been FBI, but either way, I don't think it's anything suspicious. I mean, what's the worst or what do people think is happening there? Are they thinking that these 4 cowboys entered the house to plant evidence? Like, where do you get that? Because they're cowboys? Oh man, this guy's wearing a cowboy hat. Must be planting evidence. It's going to be wild. A wild prosecution. This case has captivated many of us because it's pushing the technological limits and law and minimal precedent for evidence. Yeah, it really is. I'm not going to say that it's not. I mean, we're looking at the IGG and genealogical things. But to be honest with you, I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of cases getting solved here recently using the IGG.
Yeah.
It's like the fingerprint. When the fingerprint first came out, everybody was skeptical of that. Now it's almost foolproof. Was it ever not? Just because we had some defense lawyers saying, "Hey, and we don't know the how accurate this is," does that change how accurate it is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you how crazy and accurate it can be, though, the fingerprint. I mean, I said this story on here before because I was reading a report on it. There was one story not too far back where they arrested this, I want to say she was elderly. She was like 60-something year old lady for a murder. They brought her in as a suspect. And they're like, but this person lived, pretty far away. It was like an hour trip away. And the reason why they brought her in was because at the crime scene, they found her fingerprint. And the fingerprint was on the vase that was next to the dead body, but where they buy the vase at was at the Walmart where she worked at, where she was a stalker. And her fingerprint stayed on the glass for months after that glass was bought. And they had to, they tracked it down to that being bought at that store. And she was the work employee that was stalking at night at that store. So that's how long those fingerprints can stay on glass, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, they can stay a while. Ryan Smith says maybe Kay was driving around trying to find the drunk driver that hit people that night to impress law enforcement. Yeah, and if you believe that, then maybe his evil twin brother knew this, and while he was out looking for him, committed the perfect crime and at the same time framed his twin brother. Probably because he had a better life. I mean, it sounds like Bryan Kohberger had some pretty decent parents. He had a education. A lot of things going in his direction. Maybe he was jealous. I don't know. Let's see. I think Steve G knows what happened. I think they know a lot. I don't know if they, I'm pretty sure they know what happened. I mean, if you believe the evidence, everybody should know what happened. When did BK sleep? I don't know. He was up at 2:45. He didn't get home until after 5:30, right in the morning. Who knows how long he was awake before 2:45? If he woke up at 7 a.m. that morning of the 12th, stayed up all day, and then was awake at 2:45 and left, then didn't get home until after 5:30, then left again to get to Moscow at 9 something, and then was in Clarkston, Washington at 11 something, which is about an hour away. And then he doesn't get home until after 8 on the 13th. I mean, going from 7 a.m. on the 12th to 8:30 p.m. on the 13th. One thing I find interesting is Bryan Kohberger looks a lot more healthier in jail than he did when he got arrested. His face was sunk in, a lot skinnier. And look at Richard Allen and a lot of these other guys that go to prison. They don't usually come back looking healthier. It's usually a certain type of person that goes to jail and come back looking healthier. And it's typically a person who either is overweight and they lose a lot of weight, or somebody that's on something that they no longer have access to. And so what's the word I'm looking for? The symptoms of these drugs, the sunken mouth or cheeks, the eyes back in, the lack of sleep. Oh, what do you think, Big Blue?
I mean, that is a possibility. I always wonder if it should have been probably with them knowing his history now, would they have tested him for drugs on the way in? But they probably didn't because it's not part of the crime. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to get some of that stuff in prison. You can, but it's hard if he was on it.
Angel says, are you allowed to confirm Kaylee Todd matches the PCA information? Can you rephrase that? I'm not sure what you're asking. How do we know there wasn't more than one person? Those other DNAs are very important. Well, there's one thing that Steve brought up, the CSI guy that we just recently had from True Crime Web, is that if there was multiple people in there, and based on the description of the cast off that would have been, thrown out there, right, with the based on the description of the injuries, he stated that if there was multiple people in there, if somebody was standing there, and there was a stabbing, and when they pull out and blood goes everywhere, you would be able to see somebody standing there because there would be a stop and then a continuance afterwards with where that person was standing. So I think there would be a lot of evidence to determine whether or not there was one person or multiple persons involved in this case. There's probably the direction of where the knife was used. There's probably a lot of things. I'm not an investigator or CSI guy, so I don't know all those things, but just that bit of information and knowing how gruesome those bedrooms were described to have been, you even see blood coming out of the back of the house. So with all that being said, I think there would have been a showing or a determination if there was more than one person there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I was reading these things and I lost track of them. So I was trying to read through the questions.
Didn't Madrot call TOD the time of death? That's what you meant when you said Todd, Angel. I'm gonna see if I can get back down there. Sherry says, Daniel, on top of it tonight. Bravo, bravo. I'm so happy you are standing up to the BK defenders tonight. They bully people on a regular basis. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't really follow a lot of the videos that are out there anymore. That lead to one side or lead to that Bryan Kohberger is innocent, because it's a lot of the same stuff that's been spewed out, some of the same concerns that have been answered. And, I think there's enough there to say that, the police made the arrest on good information. Whether he's guilty or not, that's for the court to decide, right? That's for the 12 jurors. But based on the information that I've seen, it's a good case. KG was assaulted and stabbed. I don't know where you got that information, but I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't be surprised. It sounded very gruesome.
Yeah. I mean, maybe later on they might show it in the court documents, on the autopsy reports. It'll tell you how many times they got stabbed and what kind of, scratches and marks they had on their bodies.
Yeah. Judge Marshall asked BK if he had taken drugs or was currently on any, and the answer was no. He also said he didn't commit this crime. White people saying no connection. Do they have the DNA or not? He is done in the eyes of the jury with DNA. Yeah, they got the DNA. And by the looks of it, there's not much of an argument from the state. From the defense. The court has said multiple times in the documents that we wrote, the argument is futile. It's not going anywhere. They're going to look at it just so that they can't appeal it afterwards. But they got the DNA and it's going to be used against him. It is what it is.
I wonder what his voice sounds now. I always remember his voice when we brought up the rap video that he made, the rap song.
Oh, yeah. All right, I got you, Angel. Then you said Christy told you the time of death, and on the death certificate, does it tie up to the PCA? Because people are saying lives ended earlier, speculation. It aligns with the PCA. If anything, I think it said, I'm sure, I'll give you guys the time frame. It said 3:45 to 4:45. It's not at 3, not at 1, not at any other time. 3:45 to 4:45 was the time of death on the death certificate. I think there was two of them. There was the death certificate, and then there was something else. I think maybe it was the coroner, but one of them was from 4 to 5, and the other one was from like 3:45 to 4:45. The reason they said 3 to 3:30 and put that out publicly was in case somebody came out and confessed to this, or a false confession, which happens all the time. You'd be surprised how many people have confessed to the John Benet Ramsey murder and had nothing to do with it, for publicity, for fame, for whatever the reason may be. So, by the sounds of it, there wasn't a lot of information that they could have withheld from the killer. They found the knife sheath, but outside of that, and the DNA from Bryan Kohberger's, on it, beyond Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the knife sheath, they had a white car. They had basically the time in which this happened. So if they would have put out there that the time of death was between 4 and 4:30, that early on before the arrest, anybody could have gone in there and said, I killed them between that time. I was there and I used the knife, because that was already out there. So it would have been very difficult to say, all right, this is the guy. And so if you do have somebody that comes forward and says, hey, I'm the guy that committed this crime, and you say, all right, what time did you go there? I went there at 4:05. Boom. Eyes are going to open up real quick, because that's not information that they put out there. All right. Same thing could be said with the 2011 to 2013 Elantra. Right. They may have known towards the end that it was a 2015, but they wanted to make sure that the person that did come forward, there was, like I said, there's only so much that you can hide. And in this case, it sounds like a lot of it was out there. They were stabbed. There was 4 of them. I mean, the other thing was the fact that Kaylee and Madison were in the same bed. That wasn't put out there, but Steve did. So now that can't be used in a confession. Right? Does that make sense to you, Boo? Months ago, all the experts said his car would be a treasure trove for DNA. What are they saying now? Well, I mean, months ago also, people thought that he somehow must have had DNA in the car. And I'll agree to that statement. I did too. I thought there would be DNA there. But we also have to realize who we're talking about, right? This is a person who has knowledge in forensics, has knowledge in criminal justice, has knowledge in how law enforcement is going to investigate their suspect. He has knowledge on how not to contaminate a scene and how not to take a scene with him. Right. Oh. I think it would be more surprising at certain, that somebody committed this crime, right? Didn't leave any of their own DNA behind and was some kind of weird, drunken ex-boyfriend or a fraternity kid that got mad because, something happened at a party. Usually those type of crimes don't come with a lot of planning and no evidence. Those are pretty sloppy. What do you think?
And this guy wasn't just like an average Joe, I mean? Like Daniel said, this guy had some training. He had a lot of inside information that some of us would never know because we never taken the classes he has. I mean, there's times I'm taking classes and I am learning some things like, wow, I must forgot that or I didn't know that. That's good information to have. The other thing is he's also, by his family's admission and I guess the court documents admission, he has OCD, right? Mm-hmm. He had to wear gloves. He was a clean, like the clean. He didn't want certain things to touch. Those kind of people, I would say, clean their car 100 times more than me. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he would know what chemicals to use. He would know what to do to be able to get certain things off the car if he did get a stain. But to me, I think he went there prepared with something over him that he can take off and not even have to worry about his car. And if he did, he had over a month to clean it.
Yeah.
And they also recorded him cleaning it when he was at his parents' house from the trip home. So that just tells you that that's how, clean and OCD he was. Because when you're driving on a trip, I'm pretty sure, I know I do it all the time. I eat on the way where I'm going, so I drop stuff. If he's that OCD that he had to clean it right when he got home, imagine how OCD he would have been the days after. How he would have cleaned his car.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. WSU Mom Kim says death certificate says no, and it does not. There's just, I don't know who told you that or where you got that information, but that is extremely inaccurate. Why were 2 autopsies done for Ethan? I believe 2 autopsies were done for all of the victims. I found that out like a couple of days ago.
I can explain that one.
Agencies detected. How long does bleach? How long does bleach stay on something?
Why would the cleaning instructions for kids' toys to be bleach, and daycares they contaminate with bleach, and the kids are putting it in their mouth the next day because it decomposes. It wears off.
I mean, even at this watch, great point example. If bleach was that prevalent and it would show up on luminol and it would be bright and everything else, then all you had to do was just, kill a person on a hardwood floor on tile, because I can assume at one point or another that bleach was used there and it should cover up everything. It dissipates. It was over a month since the time that they got into his vehicle. It is what it is. Let's see. We'll answer a few more of these before we call it a night. Somebody said something about 2 a.m. Ethan's mom said 2 a.m. will never be the same. I mean, maybe she got a text message at 2 a.m. saying he's going to bed. I don't know. It could be a lot of things. And the time of death on the death certificate and on the And what the police had notified Kaylee Goncalves was not noon. It was within the specific time that is in the probable cause affidavit.
Yeah, maybe like when they arrive on scene, it might have like a certain form where it says arrival time at this time. That's the initial time that they were reported dead. But officially, they weren't deceased till this time after the coroner does their stuff.
Yeah. Ryan Smith says the sheath could have been touched by BK at a store, flea market. It could have been returned, sold, stolen, or loaned to someone else. Touch DNA is weak. And I agree with you. Touch DNA is weak on its own. But there's a lot more to that you're not answering or showing in this. It's not just the touch DNA. It's also the fact that he was operating a vehicle without a front license plate that matches the description of the vehicle that was parked or was seen driving in and around the area during a specific time when he had his phone off. Right. There's also the fact that you had the 12 times that he'd been in the area, the phone turning off. So it's not just the DNA. Right. If it was just the DNA on there, then he wouldn't be arrested. There's a lot more to go into that. Who discovered K and M? Roomies, hunter, cops? Have no idea, my man. To be honest with you, the only thing that I'm aware of, and I'm assuming it was the cops, was they checked Xana, or by they, Hunter Johnson checked Xana bedroom and was able to open the door, saw what he saw, and police were immediately called. Then they left. They exited the room. So I'm assuming that it was probably police, because I don't think they went up to the top floor. They have Amazon receipts for the knife sheath. That's what they claim.
Yeah. And then the other one is, I like this one. And it would be, I mean, you're driving through some states where it snowed, so your car, after the snow melts, ice melts, they're dirty. I mean, we don't have snow much here, but I know after the snowstorm, I had to wash my car because it was coated in mud and dirt from all the stuff I would pick up on the roads.
Yeah. The USA, it's just it looks like the same picture. I don't know if that's WSU Mom Kim too or not, but it says yet he left the knife sheath. Well, BTK left a gun at one of his crime scenes, and that wasn't his first crime scene either. He had more experience than Bryan Kohberger, and I think he also had some sort of law enforcement gig as well. So mistakes happen. There's a difference between practice and preparation and then the actual thing. I can tell you, and I'm sure Blue can, say it also in his profession, like you can have all the training and preparation in the world, but the first time shit hits the fan and you're put in that position, mistakes are made.
Yeah, no, I've seen it time and time again, man. I've seen it time and time again, especially when it's like a true emergency. People freeze all the time.
Yeah,
I think I did the first time, you know what I mean? Because it's a shock to you. The first time somebody passed away in front of me, I was like, man, I got to start CPR now. I got to get the AED. But in my head, I still remember the doctor jumped on the table and she's like, get me the AED now, and I'm like, I ran to go get it. I should have probably been the one jumping on the table, but she takes it over being. So she jumped on the table and started doing the CPR. And right when I turned the corner, luckily, EMS was right there, so I was all right. They have an AED in their hand. Let's get it on this person.
Yeah,
and the training's still there in my head. It's still there, but for a split second, you're like, the way people shake, the way people's eyes roll, the back of the head, the way they start gurgling when they're passing. It puts you in a state where like, whoa, what should I do now? What if I do this? You got 1,000 thoughts in your head sometimes, or none.
Yeah.
So everybody acts differently.
Yeah.
CPR is exhausting. I mean, I've done CPR a few times, and it is exhausting, man. Your shoulders hurt, your back hurts, and you got to keep going. So if somebody comes and assists you, or the AED gets put on and then it kicks in, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Oh, okay. Actually, WSU Monk Kim texted me that other Kiwi 96 is not her, but it looks like the same picture. I got keratoconus, so my vision's not the best. I got two real quick. He's so extremely intelligent and shrewd, yet he drove his white car to the murder scene among the myriad of cameras. You can't have it both ways. He's intelligent. He's not a god, right? He's not superhuman. He's not a robot. He's not, he's not absent of mistakes, right? Especially if this was his first time. When did he make these mistakes? What part of the crime were his mistakes made? It was during the commission of the crime, him driving there, him leaving the knife sheath, even him driving in front of the house. After 4:05 is when his driving becomes erratic. You can see it on the Linda Lane footage, and you can read it in the probable cause affidavit. At 4, Xana receives a DoorDash. Now, I assume, given the fact that, that address is kind of hard to find, and you can't pick your DoorDasher, and if Xana had a history of making DoorDash orders, that she would have been aware that her house is hard to find, and maybe would have left some sort of indicator like a light on outside to show the DoorDasher where she lived. And during the time on which that DoorDash item was received, Kohberger wasn't there. He didn't sit outside of the house. He passed by and then he left, and then he passed by and then he left again multiple times, right? So if that DoorDash order happened or that drop off happened before he turned up that street and never saw the food outside, to him, all he sees is a light on outside or inside the house. And then after 4:05, because the DoorDash order has been received, there's no need to keep that light on. It's off now. It's go time. And you start seeing some erratic driving. First and foremost, he does a weird turn at Queen Road at apartment 502. Then he either attempts to do a 3-point turn or park or something in front of the residence, but is unable to do so, and then continues to the King Queen Road intersection and does a 3-point turn there, then comes back around, circles around the apartment complex, and parks behind the house at 4:08. Once it became real, he was already making mistakes. And that was before he entered the house. Can you imagine, the chaos in his own mind, committing 4 murders and think that he's going to do this without any mistakes? Like Tim says, the lack of evidence is evidence in this case, because who could do that? Let's be honest. Who could do that? Could a drunk kid do that? A frat kid, out upset and mad? An ex-boyfriend upset and mad because his girlfriend's leaving to Texas? Are they capable in the moment? And these people were also drinking that night while intoxicated. We know Jack Decor was at the Corner Club. There's a picture of him there. So all these guys are capable of committing this perfect crime, intoxicated, full of rage or anger, full of their emotions, crime of passion, and not leave any evidence behind. Let's think about that logically. That doesn't make any sense. Now, if you think that, it was a hired killer, who would hire to kill these 4 girls? What is it that they had? And if you're going to say, it must have been the drug angle. All right. And somebody told me that Dylan and Bethany were lookouts and there was supposed to just be a rough up. Well, here's the thing. There's the phones for Dylan, Bethany, and the 4 victims and Jack Decor were downloaded and forensically gone through. So don't you think that police would have found said evidence of communication referencing some sort of drug stuff? Right? And are we to think then, if the goal of framing Bryan Kohberger was solely to put somebody behind bars because the pressure of the University of Idaho, don't you think that if that was the case, that if they had a secure person that they could have arrested early on in this investigation, that they would have done that, so that way they don't get in a position where they have to frame someone? And so knowing that, then we also have to also say, then there's a reason why they didn't go arrest these drug dealers. What's that reason? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe the cops are the drug dealers. Like, how crazy does this story have to get for it to not be him? For it to have been a frame job? Blue, make it make sense, please.
I mean, all I can say is, to me, the evidence to me shows that his DNA was on the knife sheath. The timing on his phone, perfect timing to be off, but he turned it on in the area where he was at, where you see his car description, like his going down the ways. The knowledge that he has, even if we put that aside, the DNA still gets him in the right spot for me to be the guy.
Yeah.
If that wasn't there and they were saying it was him without that, I would say I would agree with everybody else 100%. I don't believe it's him. How could he be there? There's no evidence. To me, the evidence is the DNA. I mean, that's my opinion, but I'm also saying he's not guilty. He's not guilty till, the jury says he's guilty.
Art Reed says 199. I think BK's DNA on the sheath was a divine intervention. I mean, it sounds like it. It had to have been something, miraculously, if he's innocent, right? I mean, evil twin brother. My brother was shot and killed December 1st, and his death certificate time of death says December 3rd because that's when they found him. First and foremost, our condolences for your brother. Second, I'm not sure what state this all occurred in. If it occurred in Idaho, then maybe, but every state has their different ways of doing things. And in this case, well, for one, 911 wasn't called until 11. When was it that the bodies were discovered? You also have the fact that somebody saw somebody leaving the house at 4:00 something in the morning, right? And Dylan. So there's a lot of circumstances that go into this. What I can say is, from Kaylee Goncalves' mouth to me, was that the time of death on the death certificate and the time that police had given them during this time while they were saying it was 3 a.m., that all of it was saying after 4 a.m. I never thought there'd be a lot of blood in the car based on the design of the K-Bar USMC knife. The hilt is designed to direct blood away from the user, spraying out, not back. And he's not actively bleeding. I think that a lot of folks are confusing the fact that somebody was actively bleeding in there or that somebody was killed in the car where blood just sprayed everywhere. By the time he gets to the car, the blood is contained to his person and what he touches. So if he's disciplined enough and has changed his clothes and marked off certain things, then he can definitely go in there and commit a crime like this. There was a guy, Chris Porco, I think it was his name. He killed his parents or killed his father with an axe to the head and put the axe in his mom's head. He drove back 3 hours to his college. And the DNA that they got him on was when he paid the toll ticket going to that house. They got DNA from him because there was no blood. There was nothing in his car that pointed that he was there. And at the crime scene, there was no evidence of a cleanup. There was no evidence of a shower. So how could he have done it? It's speculated because he was working at a veterinarian hospital for pets, and that he did surgeries and had equipment designed to protect you when you do surgeries on animals so that blood doesn't get on your person. And he had access to those things. Don't you think Bryan Kohberger has access to something similar when you're investigating a crime and you don't want to leave your DNA behind? Just a thought. Just a thought. Would he have access to Luminol? I'm sure he would. But I think if you throw that down on something, then that would be very difficult to clean up. I'm using info from the probable cause affidavit. And I use the info from the New York Times, which basically say that they had records showing certain things. I'm not sure what info that I'm using from Dateline.
Yeah, we actually, if you know us, we don't actually like Dateline. It really was, because we've been on a form of Dateline and we don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
Them and the Washington Post.
This is Rolo says, where's the footage? Blood can't be cleaned 100%. It always leaves minerals. That's not entirely true, my man. I mean, let's think about it. How many times have you cut yourself in your own house? right? How many times have you had a nosebleed, or if you bought an older house, is it possible that somebody else bled somewhere in the house? Now, if that were the case, then if you were to be killed in a house, let's just say from 1880, since Bryan Kohberger's defense likes to use that time, and a house was built then, few people have died in and out. You go through Luminol, it should be everywhere, right? Because how many people have died? I mean, look at the Earth. The Earth has been here for 4 billion years. How long has life been on Earth? If you think that something hasn't died below your feet, you're crazy. So if that were the case, that it can't be clean 100%, it doesn't degrade, it'll always be there. You can find it 7-8 weeks later, you can find it 2 months later, 2 years later, 2 centuries later. It's not true. Oh wow, good deal. I'm not a baseball fan.
Yeah, I watched last night's game, man. It was interesting. They were winning 11-1, and Arizona Diamondbacks came back, hit a 4-run. So it was 5-11 by the time it ended. But man, let's see how they do tonight. If they win tonight, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. It's not unusual to clean your car after a road trip. I don't disagree. It's not. But is it unusual after you clean your car after a road trip when you're suspected of a quadruple homicide? Maybe. Haven't y'all seen when they use the lights after bleach cleaning? Yes, we have. Bleach dissipates. Don't stay there forever. If it did, I can tell you this. I have used bleach on every part of my house. Every single part of my house. On the floors, everywhere. My house should light up every single day, right? No, it doesn't.
And what do they use to show it? Is it black lights, right? Or they use a special light for luminol? I can't remember.
What they do is they throw down a chemical. Sometimes I think it's called luminol. Like I said, I never was a CSI guy. I was never a detective. But from my understanding is that that luminol has some sort of chemical reaction with blood that allows it to glow when utilizing a black light.
Yeah, because honestly, look, where I work, we use black lights all the time because when you come in and say let's say this is a guy thing, because it's 99% guys that come in for this. They like to take the guard off the grinder, and then they don't like to wear safety glasses. Yeah. But then they are crying to me at 2 in the morning because their eye won't stop tearing up, and they want to skip the line because they have a piece of metal in their eye and it hurts too much for not wearing their safety glasses or taking the grinder thing off, the cover off. And we put a dye in their eye. We put fluorescein in, I think fluorescein in their eye, fluorescein in their eye, and then we use a black light to find them. And it's pretty crazy because you'll see it in there. Sometimes you don't even need the light or the dye to see the piece of the metal in there.
Gotcha.
And then we either pull it out with a needle or sometimes we drill it out, depending on how deep it is. Sometimes I have to go see the specialist, but the whole room doesn't light up when I'm turning that black light on, because those are the trauma rooms we use, and I never see anything light up but the patient's eye, unless they got some of the dye on their face when they blinked. So it's pretty crazy.
Lisa says, I would like to know about the IDs found in the glove in a box. I believe
the wood lamp.
When it comes to those IDs, it's been alleged and speculated that. So apparently there was a break-in with one of Kohberger's associates, friends, co-workers. I don't know what this female was to him. And somebody moved some stuff around. She informed Kohberger about it. He recommended that she put cameras in her, and that she put cameras in her house, and he ended up doing the camera installation. After his arrest, there was speculation that he was the person that initially did the initial burglary, and that information came out coincidentally after the IDs were found in the glove box. So if you put those pieces together, one person could connect the dots and say that one of those IDs was persons that Kohberger had broken into and was probably doing some weird, creepy stuff. Now we'll probably do another 2 minutes and then we'll be getting out.
Rangers need one more out, man. One more out.
What about the pizza? I don't know anything about the pizza. The car doesn't bother me. It's things like leaving the knife sheath, Amazon receipts, kindergarten stuff. Well, if he's wearing some Dickie coveralls that don't have a belt, the sheath is designed to be on a belt loop. So that would be a reason why he's taking it in with the sheath in his hand. The other reason why he has it in his hand is because it would limit the possibility of him cutting himself with his own knife. So you go in there, because if you did that, that would leave obviously some DNA. Go in there, pull the knife out at the last moment. And during the commotion, like I said, especially if this is his first time, leaving it behind is not something that's surprising to me. BTK, Dennis Rader, he left the gun behind at his scene. He went back and was able to retrieve it before law enforcement found the scene. But those mistakes can happen. Let's see. None of us would have driven our white car to a murder scene. It's criminology 101. I mean, I don't see it, to be honest with you. And if somebody uses somebody else's car, that just means they get caught faster. Like, it really is. Is it over?
The Rangers won it. Yeah, man. 5-0. 5-0.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. That Linda Lane 4-something white vehicle wasn't an Elantra. Pause and zoom in on the taillights right before it goes off frame. Mustang rear taillights, same as the one that drops off fourth kids earlier. Kovac. I've had a Mustang. I had a GT350, and those were not Mustang taillights, my man. No way a drunk could do that. Exactly. I mean, somebody who's drunk, somebody who's mad, somebody who's an ex-boyfriend, crime of passion, it just doesn't jive that they would be able to commit the perfect crime and not only do so, but also frame Bryan Kohberger in the process of doing it and commit this crime at exactly the time that they knew that Bryan Kohberger would be driving around by himself with his phone off. I mean, just like that. I also do want to say, when it comes to that is no drug house, according to Christie, toxicology report came back no drugs in the system of any of the victims. Some great, I assume that drug dealers don't have to use their own product, but how far and few in between are there that do that? I haven't seen very many. The only person that I know that has sold drugs that didn't use them was Curtis Jackson. Y'all might know him as 50 Cent. But it is what it is. I want to say thank you guys to everybody. I wanted to answer as many questions as I possibly could. We've gone over 2 hours, almost 2.5.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you guys. We appreciate everybody.
Peace out, guys. Champs.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Will you have any we're going to be back Friday. We'll talk about this case. There's a lot of stuff going on in Delphi. For those that think that we're one-sided or biased or whatever, we're really not. At one point, we thought that there was more to this Bryan Kohberger case. But as the evidence continued to come out, we've swayed away from that. Right now, I think there's more to the Richard Allen case, and I'm pretty suspicious about law enforcement there. So I call it as it is. I keep it a buck. I keep it 100. I'll tell you the truth, whether you like it or not. All right? Whether you're for the defense, for the prosecution, I'm going to tell you the truth. If you can't handle it, the truth hurts sometimes. It is what it is. Big Blue, take us out.
I just want to say thank you, everybody, and for all those Ranger fans out there that are going to be celebrating tonight. It's been a few years, I think over a decade since the last time they won. Drink responsibly. Drive safe, guys.
Blue, let's go downtown and go crazy. Honk some horns.